Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me. My name is Taylor Haynes, and this is my presentation on methamphetamine. Some background on methamphetamine. A Japanese chemist was the first to synthesize methamphetamine, which would later be called a variety of different names, including meth, crank, crystal, and speed. Several early medicinal uses for this drug included narcolepsy and weight loss. During World War II, American soldiers would tell nightmare stories about German troops that were high on a chemical called benzodrine and gave the appearance of being emaciated and psychotic. While meth use increased in the United States after the war, it was outlawed in 1970. All the different types of stimulants that we'll talk about throughout this presentation are derived from a plant called the ephedra plant, which is known to produce ephedrine, a chemical used to produce methamphetamine. Chemicals are then added to ephedrine to make other stimulants, such as methamphetamine and other substances. While ephedra has been used in Chinese medicine for over 5,000 years, use of this type of medication in the United States has only been present since the late 1800s. A Japanese chemist named Akura Ogata was able to simplify the process of making meth by using phosphorus and iodine crystals to reduce the ephedrine and crystallize it, making a substance that we better known today as crystal meth. This drug, known as methamphetamine hydrochloride, is a combination of benzodrine and other chemical additives. The United States FDA, Food and Drug Administration, discovered the severe abuse potential for this substance and the consequences related to it early in the 1950s. A decision was made at that time to make prescriptions for benzodrine the only way to access the drug. And this was identified as a controlled substance at that time. A drug pandemic in America later would rear its ugly head in the 1990s with the emergence of crystal meth in the United States. How does methamphetamine work and how does it work in the brain? The way in which methamphetamines work in the brain is a very complex process. Methamphetamines primarily target a system within the brain called the limbic system. This is the reward pathway in the brain. This part of the brain allows us to feel pleasure or excitement and is overstimulated by the use of methamphetamines. Between cells in the brain, there's a space and an area as illustrated in this slide called the synapse. The synapse is a space in between the neurons. The neurons release chemical messengers called neurotransmitters, and specifically dopamine neurotransmitters when exposed to meth. When dopamine travels across the synapse, it attaches to dopamine receptors. When the dopamine binds, proteins are then released and carry the signal throughout the cell. When a brain is exposed to methamphetamine, the re-entry into the presynaptic receptor is blocked, while there is substantial increase of dopamine released into the brain. Because the dopamine is the body's natural feel-good, the reuptake is blocked and dopamine becomes trapped in the synapse. With the dopamine trapped in the synapse, the postsynaptic receptors are activated at such high levels that they cause the user to experience intense feelings of euphoria and pleasure, making this drug severely addictive. So what's the impact of methamphetamine on the individual user and society as a whole? The impact of the use of methamphetamines causes major psychological, physiological, and even societal issues. The chemical composition of methamphetamines causes the teeth to rot and other significant impacts on weight loss, primarily due to a lack of appetite. Meth causes an increase in blood pressure and also has been known to speed up the heart to dangerous levels. Anxiety and paranoia are also common in this population due to constant stimulation of the adrenal system. Through MRIs and PET scans, we're able to actually see physiological changes in the structure of the brain, and particularly in the frontal lobe in long-term meth users. Long-term meth causes increased depression and social isolation tend to be common within this population. Amphetamines, particularly methamphetamines, have certainly evolved over the last century. There's been several attempts by both the Food and Drug Administration in the US and abroad to normalize use of this drug for a variety of different ailments. All the attempts so far have been futile. Methamphetamines alter the release of certain neurotransmitters in the brain. They flood the brain with dopamine, activate the pleasure centers in the brain, causing pleasure and euphoria. And while this is shown to have effectiveness in certain areas, such as weight loss and narcolepsy, the consequences of continued use of this substance far outweigh any proposed benefit. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and have a good day.